This is SaaS Therapy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of SaaS Therapy, the show where we help you save your most important business relationships, your customers. I'm your host, Todd Kirk. I'm joined by my often accidentally insightful co-host, Casey Trujillo. Casey, it's good to have you here as always. And we are joined today by a guest who I'm really excited to interview and get to know a little bit better, Dan Steinman, who is on the board of directors of several large companies, both for-profit and nonprofit. He has some really awesome experience back as a chief customer officer and chief evangelist for Gainsight and a host of other roles. And Dan, we are super pumped to have you on. Thanks for joining SaaS Therapy today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm 100% in on being occasionally insightful myself. So see if that works out today.
I'm gonna tell our audience today. Stop what you're doing. Listen, grab a piece of paper and pen because Dan's gonna blow your mind. I was just talking to him before this call, and already I've had like 4 or 5 insights. The best way I could compare this, and again, we probably don't have a ton of NBA basketball fans, but there was this legendary coach. He's still alive, but he doesn't coach anymore. Named Pat Riley. He was a phenomenal coach. He coached for the
Miami Heat.
Right, he coached for the Lakers forever. He went over to the Heat. He was fantastic, but then out of nowhere, there was this gentleman behind the scenes, behind the curtain, named Eric Spoelstra. And if I was to tell you who is the best coach in the NBA, it is this guy. This guy does more with less than anyone I've ever met. And so we all know about Gainsight's success. If you're in CS, you know who Gainsight is. Dan's going to tell some stories because I'm going to call him the Eric Spoelstra of Gainsight, where he was behind the curtains making things happen. Dan, you got to tell the audience, what was your role as a chief evangelist at Gainsight? What did that mean? What did you do? What were you trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I would have been happy if you'd have said Steve Kerr for me as well.
Yeah, well, he's genius too. We could go with Steve Kerr also. Yeah, we could go with that too.
In the Bay Area. But I would agree, if I had to make a list, Eric Spoelstra would be on top of it. So that's very high praise. Yeah, Chief Evangelist, very interesting title. There aren't a lot of people out there with that title. And one of the reasons is because it may or may not mean something to anybody, or it could mean almost anything you want it to mean. And the most challenging part of it, I think, for all the people I've talked to who do that job, and my own experience, was, how do we measure it? Right. At one point at Gainsight, I never saw everyone's salary, but I think I was the second highest paid person in the company. And my title was Chief Evangelist. And I would sit with my CEO and go, how are we going to measure this? And luckily, my CEO really got it, because the CEO is really the chief evangelist of every company. There may be someone with that title, but there's nobody who isn't chief evangelist as much as the CEO is. But I'd sit with him and we'd say, well, can we just figure out how many deals you were a part of and count up that revenue and blah, blah, blah. And we tried to measure it a few different ways. And then one day he sat with me and he said, Dan, I've noticed that every time you talk to a customer or a prospect, our stock value goes up. So let's just keep doing that. So he just trusted me. We built the company together in many ways. So he kind of trusted me. But ultimately, the chief evangelist role at Gainsight was an industry expertise role, which was, I would go out and preach the virtues of customer success. I would almost never use the word Gainsight other than when I introduced myself as my title or the company I worked for. Our job, we felt like number one job for us at Gainsight was to increase the visibility and the value of customer success across all of SaaS and then outside of SaaS as well. And if we did that well, we could come in behind that as the experts and sell our software. And frankly, of all the plans I've ever had in my life, that one probably worked better than anything we've ever done. Everyone in the company was an evangelist, but primarily my CEO and I just find every conference we could go to talk about customer success, trumpet the virtues of customer success people, tell every CEO in the world that you have to have a VP of customer success and you got to have a bunch of CSMs and they should be paid more than you, and all sorts of things like that. So we endeared ourselves to the community by pumping them up and being their biggest supporters. And it was also the way we sold our software, because if I could write these 78 blogs and do these 150 speaking engagements about customer success, we must know something that we might build into the software. And it was, by the way, it was really true, because many of our competitors were founded and run by people who hadn't been in customer success. So they could speak the language. In theory, you could build a pretty good product, but it came down to how the product actually worked. It really makes a big difference if you've done the job before, if you have people who have done the job before. So that's what we referred to as Chief Evangelist, was the guy who spent a lot of time on planes and in hotel rooms and in front of large groups of people or small groups. I would always say, hey, I'll speak to any group bigger than 3 people or bigger than 2 people or bigger than 1 if necessary. So yeah, we did that, and we really put our muscle behind it. And to Nick's credit, Nick, our CEO at the time, to his credit, he saw the value of that. He knew the value just instinctively, and he was right. That was a really important thing for us to do.
Wow. Dan, but the very first thing I think of that's so cool about this is how well do you think this would translate for other people? Meaning, the chief evangelist idea, the concept, I don't, most organizations, most SaaS companies don't necessarily have somebody who is like someone who's a massive believer, not just in the product, but in the problem that is being solved.
Right.
Meaning, here's what the CS person does. So if you sold some healthcare specific software, does it make sense to try to replicate that and bring in industry experts in healthcare who understand the problem and can articulate the need to solve the problem?
Yep.
As kind of a forerunner to the product sale. To me, I love that idea. And I'm curious if have you seen that translate in other places? Would you recommend people try that approach, or is it was just the timing and everything else perfectly lined up for Gainsight?
Yeah, I think there's places where it really works and probably places where it wouldn't work. The thing that made it work for Gainsight was we were blazing a new trail. It was a completely new industry. Customer success, when we started Gainsight, customer success was probably 6 or 7 years old, but it was primarily done only by Salesforce. And maybe a couple of other companies. Workday might have started, Netscape maybe did a little bit of it. But, there were only 50 SaaS companies in the world, in 2005. So most of them weren't doing customer success. So in that situation where you're trying to build a company in a new industry, then I think the title isn't necessary, but the job is absolutely necessary. And it might be done by 7 different people, or it could be done by the CEO plus 1 other primary person. The other place I think it could work is inside of a larger company. If you had a really, really new technology, something that was earth-shattering, like let's make up an example. What if Tesla tomorrow figured out that they could make batteries half the size that last 3 times as long, not just for cars, but battery technology? And Elon at times in his career has said, we're a battery company. We just happen to make cars that go around the battery, right? And that is a battleground for everybody in the world, right? Think about how many things we have that run on batteries. So if you were at that company, you could designate someone as chief evangelist for our battery technology and get out there and talk to every industry analyst and every conference you can speak at and talk about why our battery technology is 3 times better than anyone else's in the world. And guess what? If you were Tesla or Apple and you could do that, the sales of your products are going to go up if you convince people of that, right? That's the whole idea of it, is you're leading with the technology, and behind that is a product that solves a real problem for consumers or for businesses.
So Dan, you've moved on from Gainsight. It sounds like you sit on some boards, you do some different things here. You had this evangelist message that you would go out to. Today is 2025. Gainsight rehires you, says you're going to do this role again. Is your message the same? Is anything different? Walk us through what you would be out there preaching about CSMs.
Yeah, it's a great question. The message, I think, is still the same. And here's why. Two things. In the B2B software world, we tend to try to solve pretty complex problems. CRM is a complex problem. Customer success is a complex problem. Financial, whatever, right? Anything that has workflow associated, it ends up being a fairly complex problem. that means that the software to solve those problems has to be pretty complex as well. Now, we try to make it as easy to use as possible, but by definition, it's going to be relatively complex, which means we can never sell a customer, sell them 50 users, ship them 50 user IDs and say, go get them, right? Even the best education videos or whatever isn't going to get them over the hump. And the reason is not because our software is hard to use, but it's because of human behavior, the inertia of doing things the old way. I cannot even tell you how many times in my life I've said, yes, you can keep doing it in Excel, but there's a better way to do it. And in fact, I would argue Dreamforce usually has about 700 booths, and 640 of them have that message. If you're tired of doing this in Excel, you should buy our software, right? So the idea that we're trying to get human beings to change their behavior. And until we create a perfect product, one that has no bugs, one that has a perfect user interface, one that installs itself, one that spits out an ROI, a hard ROI every 10 minutes that someone's using it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we're going to need somebody to sit alongside the customer and help them maximize the value of their product. And if we don't name a person to do that, then the organization's going to try to figure out how to do that. And that's why I laugh when once in a while I'll hear somebody like Frank Slootman is pretty fond of saying this at ServiceNow. We don't need a customer success team because it's everybody's job. And if I sat with Frank, the first thing I'd say is, what happens when a big customer calls you and says, we like a competitor better, we think we're going to churn? Are you going to do customer success or not? The answer is yes. It's going to be a SWAT team. It's going to be really expensive, and it's going to be chaotic because it's not organized around any defining principle other than let's save the customer. By the way, this is the way everybody did it before customer success. When I joined Marketo, there was no customer success. I built a team. Guess what? We were doing customer success all day, every day. Most of the product managers spent almost all of their time on the phone with customers who were struggling with how to get XYZ done. And the support people were doing customer success, and the professional services people were doing it. So all I did was, when I built the team, was I took that off the plate of the product managers, off the plate of the professional services people, organized it around a retention goal, and said, let's go execute on this. And it sounds simple. That's obviously not simple to do. But the point is, I think I'd be preaching the same thing. There'd be some slight iterations. I think there's more alignment with sales in the world of customer success today than there would have been, because we preached really hard that it should not be part of sales. It should be a peer level job to sales. I still believe that, but more than ever before, I think it has to be aligned with sales, and the people doing customer success have to be not salespeople, but very sales savvy. We knew that from the very beginning, but now more and more, a chief customer officer is going to have a quota, whether it's a renewals quota or an upsell quota assigned to them, which means that's going to kind of trickle down to the CSMs as well. So a higher awareness of sales or alignment with sales, I don't know how to best say it. That's probably one of the main differences, because in many organizations, the customer success team, to basically cut costs, has been slotted underneath sales, which it was initially in the very early days of customer success. It was always under sales because the VP of sales owned the renewal number. And whenever a customer wasn't going to renew, they needed to figure out how to go get that customer back on track so they would renew. And so customer success was born under sales. We advocated that it be broken out, a seat at the table, if you will, right? An equivalent seat at the table. And now I think it's kind of being sucked back in many ways. At least intellectually, you got to be really aligned with sales.
Yeah, Dan, I think that's a sentiment that we've heard echoed over the last couple of years a lot, is this motion more towards being more responsible for the revenue and maintaining the revenue and growing the revenue and having a quota and an expectation. So that's something that I've seen a lot. Is there anything else that you would say is different in the way CS is approaching it today? So, like, as an example, like some orgs, I notice they build their CSM team around kind of like trainer-esque product SMEs, right? It's more of a support role. where there are others who it's more of an advisor and it's more of like a business SME rather than a technical SME. Hey, think through how you're going to get the value out of this and the strategy you're going to approach rather than like, here's where the buttons and clicks are.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, as you continue to see that shift, is the shift towards sales is an obvious one, mostly because SaaS companies are just hungry for it. They need it. It's really essential right now. But are there other things that you think would shift or change, or how you would structure and focus their time and their energy?
I don't think so. I think that conceptually the idea of customer success hasn't changed, and that is we have a reactive team. We have a support team. You can call them, email them anytime when something's wrong, and they'll help you. Their lives are reactive. Customer success idea behind customer success was, how can we be proactive? Now, we're not going to be proactive all of the time, but in an ideal world, every single activity that I do as a customer success manager is a reaction to some piece of data that makes it feel proactive to the customer. For example, simple call to a customer. Hey, Mr. Customer, looks like things are going pretty well. However, we shipped a new release 6 weeks ago, and I noticed that you haven't used either of the 2 new features in that new release. Can I spend 20 minutes with you and show you how to use those? Right? I'm reacting to the data that says they haven't used those features, but I'm proactive to the customer saying, let's get ahead of this. Because if we get to the end of the renewal cycle and we want to raise our price by 10% and they've never used any of the new features we've shipped in the last year, that's going to be a harder thing to do, right? So with the constant mantra of, are we maximizing the value that we get from every customer, the goal of that is to be as proactive as possible, to always be looking at the data. We need to have a health score for every single customer. That is not a new idea. I think we coined that phrase 14 years ago, but it's still something that many companies don't do very well. Do you know how healthy your customers are? Because every single one of your customers has a health score. The only question is, do you know what it is or not? It's like a line of people outside the doctor's office. Every one of them has a pulse and a blood pressure reading and a heart, and cholesterol or whatever. But do you know what those are? No, you don't. Not until you get in and look at the data and test the data. So I'm still really big on the idea that we can be very, very, very proactive. And of course, there's a bunch of ways of doing that. One of the bigger themes that's happened in the last 10 years and now is accelerating is, can we do customer success with some of our customers without anyone ever talking to them? Because most SaaS companies end up with a pretty long tail. It's part of the art of SaaS, right? It's easy to install, easy to get up and running. Therefore, you can lower prices, which means you're going to have a whole bunch of low-paying customers. And what we used to call many-to-one or one-to-many customer success, and we called it tech touch. Now it's becoming AI, but AI to me is just an extension of all the ways we tried to use technology to interact with customers so that we didn't have to make expensive phone calls to them. And so, but that is accelerating rapidly. The other thing that has become really, really obvious in the last 5 years or so is that every single thing you can do from a tech touch or technical customer success standpoint for the low end, you think you're building it for the low end of your customer base, it actually trickles up and will have a positive impact on every single customer in your pyramid. The opposite of that is not true. Really high touch, quarterly business reviews, executive conversations with the highest customers, that doesn't trickle down at all. But everything you do digitally will trickle up. So I'm arguing that potentially, if you have the right person, the most valuable customer success manager that you have in your company is not the guy who manages your 5 biggest customers. It's the person managing 2,000 customers who never uses a phone and keeps that retention rate at 85% or higher. Because guess what? If I lose my top guy managing my biggest accounts, I could go to LinkedIn and find 175,000 people who could do that in about 10 minutes. If I lose that person who knows how to do the digital thing, there's about 11 of them in the whole world. And that person is way more valuable because, like I said, everything they do trickles up to all of our other customers. So that's why I think we used to have a hierarchy of customer success, which is the junior customer success people work on the small accounts, the mid-level work on mid-level accounts, the senior ones. That's the wrong way to think about the career path of a customer success manager. Each of those is different skills, and the best at the low end might be more valuable to you than the best at your top end, at your senior end. So
It's awesome, Dan. I love that insight. Just wow, great insight. I hope everybody paused on that one and sharing that with your leadership team right there. Dan, I actually think you've done too good of a job as an evangelist. Everybody has CSMs. They say the average organization, like an ABC company, they subscribe to over 300 different software applications.
Yeah.
Again, not every customer is the same, but let's just imagine that you're one of the big companies and you spend a lot of money in all this technology. You might have 40 CSMs calling on you to try to get your time.
Yeah.
Dan, how would you consult a SaaS CSM team to say, here's how you're going to stand? There's now competition. Dan, at the beginning, you're preaching it. People start doing CSMs. You're the first to get a CSM, and that's kind of unique. And you're like, wow, what a value. Then all of a sudden, everybody copies. So now you have all these SaaS vendors. Again, not everybody's the same point of contact, but a lot of these SaaS organizations live in IT. They have an IT owner, maybe a business owner, but that same person's handling probably 5 or 6 different software applications and trying to get their employees to do it.
Yeah.
Dan, what would be some ideas, some tips that you might give to a SaaS organization that's saying, hey, I need my CSMs to stand out, the ones that are giving those phone calls? What would be some suggestions you might have?
Yeah, it's a great question, because technology overload is a real thing. And I think people who run IT organizations have done that for a while and realize that. Like, could we use that tool to do that thing? Yes. But we bought 3 in the last year and we're not up and running on all 3 of those. We're not adding another one because it's just going to end up being ugly. So if we can get past that, where the company really is bought in, this is one of the reasons that customer success needs to have the ear of the sales team, mostly the VP of sales. Because if you aren't setting us up for success, then we are going to fail. If you oversell even in the slightest, we're going to suffer the consequences of that. If you don't hand off really well from sales to customer success, we're going to suffer the consequences. And this is where it plays out. Like, if I don't get a good warm handoff with a joint call between the sales guy and the CSM, that person on the receiving end, the customer, isn't going to know me and is going to be less likely to respond to me when I call them. So we just need to do all of those steps really well, and that handoff is really, really important. Once you get into the everyday working world with a customer, your job is really hard but simple, and that is, do you have provable value to share with them? Because they'll give you some time on the phone, but if they give you 20 minutes and they haven't gotten value out of you, that's why we said early on, the check-in call is a dead thing. We can never do another check-in call. I would have dozens of CSMs working for me. I would talk to customers and I'd say, if any of my CSMs ever call you and say, I just want to check in to see how things are going, I want you to do 2 things. First of all, hang up the phone as loudly as you possibly can, and then call me and tell me that happened, because that is not okay. We cannot call a customer and say, I hope things are going well. How's it going? Just checking in. We know more about how well they're doing with their product than they do. If you have 20 licenses, I can tell you exactly how often every single license is being used, and that there's 3 of them that have never been used. I can tell you whether the usage rate is going up or down. I can tell you if there's ROI, clear ROI in the way you're using our product or not. I can tell you how you compare from a health score standpoint to the best in your industry, and how you could bridge that gap, right? I have so much value I could bring if I am good at my job and if I dig up that data. What I often say to CSMs, because it is hard to get people's attention. Great salespeople go through this too. Someone in the middle of a process suddenly goes silent, right? They're 3 steps into the pipeline and suddenly I can't get them on the phone anymore. So there's no tricks probably that haven't been tried. But one of the things I always said to my CSMs, there's 2 ways you can start a conversation with a customer where they'll lean in and listen to you. First sentence starts like this: my very best customers do. And you can finish that sentence any way you want, right? Because they want to know how the best customers are using your product. This is one of the reasons when we would do quarterly business reviews with our customers, we would share their health score. Your health score is 72. We would just stop there. What do you think the next words are? How can we get it higher? Or what's the best, right? It's such a great opportunity. Oh, the best in the industry is 91. And here's the 7 things you need to do to get to 92. Let's start working on those. Because everyone's competitive, right? We're in a world where these people are all competitive. So if you can entice them that way. The other thing that you can say to a customer that gets their attention is, I've noticed that because I have a ton of data about how you are or aren't using my product. I've noticed that your 2 best users a year ago are no longer your 2 best users. They're dropping off, et cetera, right? There's a million things you could say at the end of that sentence. But those kinds of things, benchmarking either against other customers or internally, how you doing versus where you were a year ago. Those kinds of things really get customers' attention. And if you do your job well, you get their attention, then you add value, right? Here's my plan of attack for those 2 people who used to be our best users and now have dropped off. I'm going to try to get the 2 of them quickly on a call with me together, hear their feedback, and then see if we can stimulate some getting back involved with the product kind of thing. So I don't think there's not a lot of magic in this. It's persistence. This is why we say same thing with salespeople, right? Sales is really a science, but the fact that it's a science, measuring things through the pipeline and how likely they are to close and all those, doesn't take away the salesperson's personality. And some of them are way better at it than others. The same is true for customer success. We can measure everything, but when you do get the customer on the phone, you need to be likable, you need to be valuable to them, et cetera. And there's 2 real areas of value for a CSM. One is industry expertise. So if I sell an accounting package, I better know something about accounting so I can talk to the customer, not about our product, but how about their process, their accounting processes or whatever. And the second is product expertise. Like I tell my CSMs, I will never expect you to be able to code our product or even know what code is being used. But if a user asks you a user question and you can't answer it, then you're not doing your job. You need to be the best user of our product in the world. You need to know how every piece of it can be used to the fullest extent. Now, that's easy if you're a 1 product company. There comes a time where that breaks down. If you're Oracle, there's probably nobody who's an expert on all 17,000 of their products. But the idea, though, is that you have to bring direct value to the customer with regard to your knowledge of how to use our product and your knowledge of the industry. Luckily at Gainsight, the people on the phone were in the industry that they were supporting because they're customer success people. So if they call the customer and the customer said, let's not talk about the product today. Tell me what your compensation plan looks like and how you would suggest we build a good comp plan for customer success people. Well, we ought to have CSMs who have an opinion on that. That has real value to the customer and brings so much credibility. The more of those kinds of questions you can answer as a CSM, the more valuable you are and the more likely they are to see your product in a positive light, because that credibility from that industry expertise is really high. Like I usually use this example. If I'm building a finance package, do I want a really senior, seasoned, really good CSM? Yes, I do. But would I trade that for somebody who's lived their life in finance and is just getting started in customer success? I think I would opt for the latter because I think I can teach them customer success more easily than I can teach them finance. And I think the other thing that's valuable is 2 things in that world. That CSM with finance background, number 1, is going to be able to have great conversations with the customer on the first day of their job because they can talk about that finance piece. Like when I would call VPs of customer success, I'd be like, let me just tell you what I think your calendar looks like for this week. And I would just rattle off all the meetings I know are on their calendar, Code Red meeting and the executive blah, blah, blah. And they'd be like, oh, yeah, you've done this job, right? That's really powerful. And then the second part of it is if I hire somebody who really has an expertise in finance, first of all, they're going to figure out our product really quickly. Secondly, they're going to be able to give us a ton of product feedback because they know that industry maybe better than some of our product managers do. So That was a very long-winded answer, and I bounced around a little bit, but those are some of the
But
things.
it's a good one. It's a good one, Dan. You know, one of the things I was trying to think through how I could tie that all together into a nice little package. And the first thing that came to my mind is how important it is to build trust with a customer. And one of the things that I think is challenging is every single one of us and every aspect of our lives at any given time is in some kind of status quo stasis level.
Yep.
And generally what we're trying to do is convince people that they should change from where they are now to something else.
That's right.
And you know, years ago, Microsoft invested in training every single one of their CSMs to become change management experts, get certified
Yep.
using ProSci and change management
Yep.
there. And so I think that's great. I love that. But I think it's like it really boils down when it comes down to change and trying to get a customer to really get the value out of something. They have to change their behavior. And so your point there is, well, what does it take to convince someone to change their behavior? And a lot of it is I believe in Dan and I trust Dan, and Dan has shown me repeatedly through his actions and through his approach and through his expertise that what he says, I can have confidence that it's going to pan out good for me.
That's right.
And that's something that's really hard to just somehow like turn into a product. Like, so you probably are always going to need some level of human aspect in order to make that occur, because in order to build trust, like that's a very human thing. And so I guess that's my attempt to wrap up what you said in a package. Would you agree with that? Or would you add anything else to that kind of simple, basic idea?
Yeah, I do agree with it. And I'll add one thing. What you just described, Todd, is something that I don't think AI will ever be able to do. The best agent will always be able to impress a customer with their knowledge. And I mean an AI agent, because they'll know everything. But they can't become people, right? You can't sense. I don't think an AI agent, at least in my brain, will never be able to sense a customer's frustration or to be able to talk to them in a way that builds trust, not just because I know something that they don't know, but because I have a way of saying it to them or sharing it with them or sharing it at just exactly the right time so that they do feel like I have their best interests at heart. It's like there's just a difference between a human being having a conversation with another human being versus a bot who has all the knowledge and has all the documents memorized and can say you should do this step after this step. That's going to have its place, but I can't imagine that it's going to replace. I can't imagine replacing CSMs with an agent. Maybe part of the job. That's probably the way these things usually go, right? It'll take away some of the mundane parts of the job and then raise the bar higher for the other parts of the job. So I'll have more time to have senior level kind of strategic conversations instead of low level. Here's how you log in, right?
Yeah.
Worst case scenario is wasting a support or a CSM's time helping somebody log in.
Right. Well, Dan, I want to hit back to a point that we talked about earlier, where you talked about the premise of, okay, if you have a CRO, there should be a CCO. The CCO's over CSMs. I think you said professional services, onboarding, the entire customer experience, and then you have the sales. And you talked about having not that you want it, but you kind of need it, is this friction between the head of CS and the head of sales. And I want you to dive into that more, because I think in today's culture, and again, I'm not trying to take shots at the younger generation or anything like that, but it's like, hey, foosballs and drinks and video games, and let's just all get together and go do a service project. There should be no tension, and people tried to eliminate tension.
Yeah.
Dan, you're kind of saying there's a healthy tension, and could you explain that more to the audience and what you mean by that? Give some examples so people know, like, this is a good thing. Again, if leadership's making it a safe place, if leadership's saying we need this, right, it can be very beneficial. But would you mind just diving more into that?
Yeah, I would start by saying, if you know any CEO who's been a CEO more than, let's say, 2 or 3 years, and you ask them, do you want tension between the members of your senior team? And if their answer isn't yes, then if I'm a VC, I'm not funding them, or I'm taking back my money or whatever. Because smart people at leadership levels know that there's something called what I call healthy tension. And I'll start with a simple example that everyone will get, and that is tension between marketing and sales. Like if I'm a CEO and I have a sales leader who says, boy, everything marketing's doing is perfect. I couldn't think of a thing that I would like better or differently. I think I would have to fire that VP of sales immediately because I don't want them to be satisfied with marketing. I can't afford to have them be satisfied with marketing. Really, don't you want better leads? Don't you want more leads, et cetera, right? So there's this tension between sales and marketing where sales says, I need more leads, I need better leads. Come on. And marketing then says, I give you a lot of leads and you squander most of them. Why don't you execute better? Then you won't need any more leads, right? Now, if that's done in a healthy way, that's really good. They're both pushing each other to be better at their job, which makes the company better. Same kind of situation has to exist between customer success. I'll just start with product, between customer success and product. Now, in the good old days, you guys may not have been around, but I was before SaaS. The sales team was the only team in the company that was putting pressure on on product. And the VP of sales would often be in the product VP's office, maybe even standing on his desk saying, if you don't build me these 3 features, our competition is killing us and we're all going to die, right? We're going to go out of business. Every day there was some tension from sales to build a better product, to get it out faster, to make fewer bugs, et cetera. Well, when SaaS came along, we suddenly came across this idea of renewals and upsells, all of which are necessary for a thriving business. Here's a team of customer success people who are now putting similar pressure on product. For the first time ever, it's coming from 2 sides. It's like, I know sales wants those new features. What we want is for the features that we've shipped to work the way we showed them they would in the demo and to make the performance of the product better. If we don't do that, we're going to all starve to death because they won't renew their contracts. Now, all of a sudden, you've got 2 people pushing against product. That's a good thing because product can push back and say, do a better job of selling. And then you won't need those 3 features. We're working on them. But in the meantime, you got to just do a better job of selling. And they have every right to say the same thing, customer success. Yes, we know the performance could be better. And we might have misled people a little bit with our demo, our pre-release demo. But you still have a job to do. Get out there and show them how the product really works and make sure they know the value of it, right? So that's product and sales and customer success. And the same thing happens between sales and customer success, which is customer success has every right to say, hey, you need to set these customers up better for success. If they're in this industry, we need to show them this part of the product. We can't sell them our cheap onboarding. We have to sell them our way more expensive onboarding because we know it's going to be a pain to get them up and running, that it always has been. And sales has every right to push back and say, you guys need to improve your onboarding process so that we don't have to sell a $50,000 onboarding package, to a $50,000 customer. So there's, again, examples, everyone could come up with them. And if that tension between these groups is managed and healthy, this is what pushes the company forward. It's just like if you're a tennis player and you're playing with somebody who's just a little bit better than you, there's a really good likelihood that you're going to get better because of that. And when you get better than him, he's going to push himself to get better. And this is that healthy competition and tension that moves a company forward. And I think an experienced CEO would say, I stop it when it looks like it's going to turn into a fist fight. But if I don't have arguments and really hard discussions between my senior team leaders, then I'm not doing my job right. I'm not pushing them hard enough. Because if you push somebody hard enough, they're going to find out that they can't do it unless someone else helps them. Like if I'm the CCO and the CEO says, I need your retention to be 147%. Well, my answer is going to be, then you better tell sales to stop selling to this industry because we can't make those customers successful. And by the way, the second product that we quote unquote shipped doesn't work at all. So none of our customers are buying it. So I don't have any chance of reaching that retention goal unless you get the product right and the sales team right. And that's a totally legitimate conversation, right? If I'm a CEO, I'd expect that. If I'm giving you a high goal, you better not just say, okay, you better say, I can do that. But here's the 3 things I need from you and from the rest of the organization in order to hit that number. Boy, there's not a VP of sales in the world that's worth their salt that doesn't do that. I'll take a higher quota Sure, give me 6 more headcount, another ops person, and a product that doesn't have any bugs in it, and I'll deliver exactly what you're talking about, right? That's the way senior leaders are. They want more responsibility. They want to be pushed to do more, but they don't want to be asked to do that without the supporting infrastructure that makes it possible.
Oh, Dan, it's so good. All I could think of after you started there was, from now on, me and Casey are going to be Rocky Balboa and Apollo Creed, and we're just going to
Yeah,
go at each other
yeah,
constantly. That's my new plan.
yeah.
So you get to decide, Casey, if you're Rocky or Apollo, though. So
Here's the poster for you guys. If you remember at the end of Rocky 3, when Apollo trained Rocky to
Oh
finally get
yeah.
Mr. T, and he said, "I'll do it, but I want a favor." Rocky says, "I want a favor," and they get in the ring together at the very end with no crowd. It's just the two of them, right? And the very last scene, more immortalized by Leroy Neiman in a painting, is the two of them both punching and
right,
just about to hit the other guy in the face, right?
yeah.
That's the picture, right? These two guys are friends, they're competitors, they're going to get up off the canvas and be friends again, but they're going after each other, right? So that kind of tension is a good
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Oh, it's so good, Dan. There's so much of that rings true to me, and I love it so much. But I also think about so many people in the audience who are probably either worried that the tension has gotten to a toxic or an unhealthy level inside their organization, or it doesn't exist
Yeah.
because everybody is happy and content to sit with things are and just kind of watch the company wither and drain up slowly on the vine. And so, like you mentioned a lot of really good ideas there on like how you build that healthy tension. But let's say you're in an organization where everybody is all sunshines and rainbows and let's all be happy and get along and sing kumbaya and not actually push each other. What would you do if you're in the CEO seat to try to create that healthy tension for the people who are not in that hungry state?
That's a good question. First of all, there's no company like that, but let's answer the theoretical question anyway. I think if I was the CEO, one of the ways I'd get people out of their doldrum, if you will, would be to give them really, really, really unrealistic goals
Mm.
to see how that would shake things up. Like, I'll tell you a quick story. Way back when I worked at a company called Silicon Graphics, we made the dinosaurs move in Jurassic Park. That's our claim to fame.
That's cool.
And I knew the guy who ran channel sales really well, and his sales guys, worked on a quota that they could kind of make by selling into their territory themselves, but they were pushed to try to get the channel to deliver for them as well, right? Because we're trying to build out the channel. And 1 year towards the end of the year, I said, "What are you going to do next year differently, Eric?" And he said, "I'm going to triple everyone's quota." Because everyone's relying on themselves to make their number. And that's not what we want to have happen. And I want them to look in the mirror and say, I cannot make that number by working harder. I can only make that number if I nurture a few of our channel partners to sell into my territory successfully. And that was just a complete befuddlement for me. That would be a strategy. And the more I thought about it, the more brilliant I realized it was. He was going to go triple their quota. None of them were going to try to make that number on their own, which is exactly what he wanted. So if I was in that situation working for a CEO and I thought everything was fine, and he said, your retention number last year was 110, I need it to be 185 this year. It wouldn't be more than about 10 minutes before I'd be complaining about the product or saying that we're overselling, our demo is not how the product really works, or whatever. I'd be coming up with all sorts of reasons that I can't make that number, or things we have to fix in order for me to make that number. I think that would create a ton of tension, especially if he did the same thing to sales and the same thing to product. I think about those three as that golden triangle.
Yeah, because you want that to come to light, right? You want the real issues that are coming out, and so you can see them and you can address them, and I think that's the main point of that. I love that, and Dan is
great CEOs of great companies have to do this because success breeds contentment. Think about it, if you're running Google or Facebook or Tesla or Amazon or places like that where 87% growth last year, that's not good enough. It's got to be 120 this year, right? That's the way you have to run those companies, with ridiculous, outrageous expectations, and that'll filter some people out of the business, but it'll also create an attitude that says, hey, we all have to be better at what we're doing, or we can't do this together.
It's awesome. Dan, this is SaaS Therapy. It's been very therapeutic for me. I've taken away a bunch of good things. But at the end, we always like you to play the therapist. Our audience is sitting on the couch, and you now get the chance to give them a homework assignment. So the next time you meet them, they've worked on something. Dan, if you could give one homework assignment that everyone would go and do, what would be your homework assignment you give them?
I'll use a mantra I've used forever, because you can always say it and it's still not true. And that is, become more data driven, right? Especially to customer success people, because there is a part of the job that's a relationship, just like sales. But I always say to CSMs, if you're super lucky, there's one customer in your entire career who will renew their contract because they like you, and they'll only renew it once. Everything else has to be based on you proving value to them. And the only way to do that is to be maniacally data driven. Like you need to know everything about how that customer is using your product. Are they coming to your webinars? How many times have they renewed? How many extra products have they bought from us? How much has their user license grown? What are their last 8 NPS scores? Or however you're measuring those kinds of things. And this was the art of the beginning of customer success, was bringing all that information together. But are you using it? Because the only way to get more efficient at your job, other than having a bot take over your job, is to be more data driven. So you can precisely talk to the right customer at the right time. I remember this revelation when I was at Marketo. I had, I think, 5 or 6 CSMs, and I was out on the floor just walking around, kind of listening to their calls. And I went back to my office and I said, I'm 100% convinced that every single customer that we spend an hour with is better off at the end of that hour than they were at the beginning. What's haunting me was that the right customer to spend that hour with? If that customer would have renewed 9 months from now without that hour, we should have spent it somewhere else. So in many ways, it's good to make a happy customer happier, but it's way more valuable to the company to make a ticked off customer semi-satisfied, inch them closer to renewing, because that happy customer is almost certainly going to renew. Now, there's a bunch of other factors too. Do we have things to upsell? Big upsells are really huge from a retention standpoint, but at the end of the day, saving a customer tends to be more valuable than increasing the NPS score of a given customer. So and the only way to do that, I think, is to be really maniacal about being data driven, and don't give in to the noise. Just because you haven't talked to a customer in 7 months, if you can look at their usage and their health score and everything else is good and going in the right direction, you're probably okay not talking to them. So it's just as valuable to know who to not talk to as it is who to talk to. And the only way to do that is to have a really good set of data and use it vociferously, because that's the only way to test it. Is it really the right set of data? Well, if we used it and we did exactly what you said, and 28% of our customers churned, then that data is either the wrong data, or it's no good, or we need a different set of data to measure our customers on. And that will happen. But the best way to test it is to use it.
Awesome.
So we just have to be completely data driven as an organization. And sales, same way, right? Like there's no VP of sales in the world who doesn't know exactly what their pipeline looks like for this quarter. That's just data, right? And that's what drives them to a VP of sales. Pipeline is exactly what the health score is to a VP of customer success. It's their indication of what's going to happen in the future. My barometer, right? My leading indicator. So I think organizations over the years have obviously become more and more data driven, including product, and I think product and customer success should probably share some metrics around usage of the product and the ramp time of a new customer and things like that, because that's partly the product and partly customer success. But yeah, I'm just a big fan of being maniacal about data.
Dan, I can say with confidence at the end of this conversation that you have not been accidentally insightful, as my friend Casey has been. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm going to have to go back and listen to this again, just because there's so many good nuggets in here. So thanks everybody for joining us today. Dan, if people want to get a hold of you or find you, what's the best way for them to come across your stuff?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the easiest. Start there. I always respond. I check it every day. I'm no longer maniacal about midnight email and LinkedIn requests, but I check it several times a week. So if you want to catch me there, I absolutely will accept your connection request and respond to you if you have a question or want to talk further.
Dan, thank you again. And
Thanks,
man,
Dan.
have a great rest of your day. You're amazing.
It was really fun. Thank you, guys.
SaaS Therapy is brought to you by Brainstorm, the SaaS platform for SaaS adoption. Learn more at brainstorminc.com.